The silence after Dad died was a physical thing, a pressure in my chest, a hollowness that echoed the emptiness of the house. 20 years old, a sophomore psychology major, ID planned a brief stay, a dutiful presence at the funeral. But I stayed. Grace, my stepmother, 43, didn't urge me to leave, didn't ask me to go. Dayton, Ohio, our small town, they say everyone knows everyone else's business. Not entirely true. They only guess. Grace was the only woman Dad loved after Mom died. She didn't replace her, didn't try to be something I didn't need. She just was. The days after the funeral, the house felt vast, not because someone had departed, but because everything that filled the air, voices, the morning radio, unfinished dinner conversations, vanished with him. Grace and I were shadows, briefly overlapping in hallways, kitchen, stairwell, then separating, each retreating into our private worlds. Grace shed her perpetual black, but the floral dresses and high heels never returned. My nightly hot baths continued, but the humming stopped. Subtle shifts, unnoticed by others. Her chair pulled up at 7 each evening, even when no one sat opposite a forgotten bottle of wine, untouched, on the kitchen counter. We didn't discuss the pain, merely skirted around it, like a room bathed in harsh, unwelcome light, a space we avoided entering. One snowy evening, the first snow of the season falling like soft silk against the window pane, I saw Grace before the refrigerator, gazing at a water bottle for a full minute. She didn't open it. Nothing. Just stood there, as though awaiting a decision from some unseen source. I didn't ask her thoughts. I poured myself water, setting the glass near the sink. The next morning, the glass was empty. Perhaps words weren't necessary, just a silent witness, free from judgment. I didn't tell my college friends about living with my stepmother, not out of shame, but to avoid the inevitable why questions. 3 times a week, I drove to school, returning late. Grace never inquired about my studies, tests, or grades. Yet, I always found an extra portion of rice, carefully wrapped, my favorite. I never asked about her sleep, her well-being, her visitors. But I kept cold medicine on hand, new novels on the shelf, occasionally leaving a note. Heater's noisy downstairs. Fixed it. That was our rhythm. No labels, no explanations. But we held on. I recall Grace opening the closet, then immediately closing it. Inside, Dad's gray suit hung neatly, the hanger beside it, empty. I wanted to ask why she didn't put it away, but I imagined she wasn't ready, maybe never would be. One night, the hallway light burned out. I replaced the bulb. As I stood on the chair, Grace emerged from her bedroom. She paused, silent. We gazed at each other in the new, brighter, colder light. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." "You're welcome," I replied. For the first time in months, her voice was clear, strong. I met her gaze. We never uttered his name, yet every action in the house occurred within its shadow. Grace continued, placing the newspaper on the table, unread. "Why no?" I kept the radio on at breakfast, the music barely audible. Silence became our unspoken pact, a polite grief, until I overheard the first whisper at the corner coffee shop. "A man, sipping espresso," remarked. "A son living with his stepmother sounds wrong." His companion chuckled. "Nobody does that unless something's amiss." I lingered, not angry, just weary. Weary of people forcing life into neat boxes, weary of grief adhering to a rigid schedule. That evening, I went home. Grace was arranging flowers, a rare occurrence since the funeral. Leaning against the doorframe, I heard her ask, "Tea?" "Yes," I said. We drank tea, we didn't talk. But for the first time, I wondered if our cohabitation wasn't merely endurance, but a mutual restraint, preventing us from drifting too far from life's current. We didn't need to declare we were okay, our quiet existence proved it daily. Some relationships defy labels, they require only time and silence. Grace and I never shared intimate moments, not in the conventional sense. No hugs, no laughter-filled meals, no TV nights huddled together. But, subtly, imperceptibly, a different kind of closeness bloomed. One morning, a small note, written in a slanted, careful hand, lay on the table, waffles in the box. Bring them to school. I stared at it, not at the message, but at the meticulous script, as if she'd rehearsed it before writing. I began leaving notes of my own coffee maker jammed. Fixed it. Drink enough water, Mom. These small notes evolved into a private language between two people who were no longer strangers but didn't dare to fully approach each other. Each morning, I'd find her at the kitchen window, sipping tea, gazing at the yard. I never asked her thoughts, but every day I filled her thermos with boiling water before leaving. She never thanked me, yet the thermos was always washed and returned to its place upon my return. Gradually, we learned presence without further hurt. I started cleaning Dad's room, not to erase memories, but to make space for something new, the breath of a present that demanded to be lived. Grace didn't question my actions, but I sensed her awareness. For the first time in a year, I saw the window open, the curtains drawn back. One evening, while folding a blanket, she knocked. She held one of Dad's old shirts. Keep this? If not, I'll put it away. I took it, folded it. I'll keep it. She nodded, silent, and we stood for a moment, hearing only the heaters rattle. From then on, Grace cooked again, not daily, but each time she'd ask casually, boiled some corn. Can you eat it? Or, cream soup. Allergic to mushrooms? I'd reply, sure. It wasn't about the food, it was, are you still here with me? Our meals were brief, but sometimes I'd linger over the dishes, letting her tell a story. When I was young, I worked in a used bookstore. The old books smelled like wood stoves, a scent they don't print anymore. I didn't ask why she hadn't shared this before, why her voice sometimes faltered. I simply nodded, I understand. One day, rain fell heavily. I arrived home late, soaked, and chilled. Entering, I saw a towel on a chair, a note atop it, hot water's on in the bathroom if you want it. I passed her room, the door was ajar. She lay reading. She didn't look up, but I knew. I whispered, "Thank you." For the first time, her immediate reply, "You're welcome," felt like a restarted heartbeat. We weren't a family, not in the traditional sense. No framed photos, no chess nights, no weekend shopping trips. But we'd become a haven, a place of quiet return. I noticed her clothing choices simple, but with subtle patterns, her gait slower, yet straighter, her calls to me clearer. I repaired the back porch, replacing rotten wood. That day, she brought out 2 cups of tea, setting them beside her. This place has a lovely morning sun. We should sit here more often. I smiled. I agree. No explanations, promises, or questions. What were we? In a world of noise, sometimes silent presence speaks the loudest. Life offers fleeting moments that alter perception. Mine came one spring night. My eyes were irritated, seasonal allergies. I remembered old eye drops, likely in the laundry basket, mistakenly placed in Grace's room by her last wash. The hallway light was dim. The house was quiet, only the heaters hum. I knocked softly, no answer. I opened the door, intending to retrieve the drops. The desk lamp was on, the room was empty. A folded blanket, the window closed, everything in its place. The hallway light cast long skeletal shadows, the only illumination in the otherwise hushed house. My eyes burned, a familiar springtime torment. I remembered the eye drops, tucked away, I thought, in the laundry basket. Grace's last wash, likely, had misplaced them in her room. The heater hummed a low, monotonous tune, the only sound besides the rhythmic thump of my own heart. I knocked, a tentative tap against the wood. Silence. Then I opened the door, my intention singular retrieve the drops. The desk lamp cast a warm, unwelcome glow, the room empty save for the neatly made bed and the usual quiet order. A folded blanket lay precisely where it should, the window securely closed. Everything was exactly as it should be, yet unsettlingly so. I walked to the small table beside the bed, where books and reading glasses usually resided. As I bent to peer into the top drawer, something on the surface caught my eye. A box of condoms lay open, its contents partially visible. Beside it, a long pale cucumber rested nonchalantly atop a half-read, crimson-covered novel. I stood frozen, my hand hovering, touching nothing. The familiar room had transformed. It was no longer a sanctuary, but a wind-whipped wall bordering a forbidden territory. I wasn't shocked, not panicked, not even particularly curious in the way one might speculate. Only one, unwavering certainty possessed my mind. Grace was alive, vibrantly so. She harbored desires, private desires, hidden from view. We'd never discussed her private life. I'd never considered she might possess a world of her own, a world concealed behind the door that closed each night. I'd always perceived Grace as quiet, patient, polite, a steady rhythm of this house. I'd forgotten she was a woman, a wife, a woman with the full spectrum of human experience, including those aspects society often denies women. Quietly, I retreated, closing the door as if it had never been opened. I went to my room, the image burning behind my eyelids, and told no one. But that night, sleep eluded me. I felt neither disgust nor disappointment, only surprise. Not at what I'd seen, but at my own limited perception of Grace, my narrow, constricted view. What key? I'd believed I respected her, truly respected her. But that respect, I now realized, had been a polite, suffocating cage, a societal, stereotype, the calm, self-sacrificing stepmother. And what I'd witnessed that night shattered that illusion. The next morning, life resumed its ordinary course. Grace prepared breakfast, I washed the dishes. We exchanged small talk, the weather, the need for awning repairs. No mention of the previous night. No word about the eye drops, the room, the unspoken truth hanging between us. Yet, I knew she knew. And I understood she required no explanation. We chose silence, a shared unspoken agreement to maintain the status quo. From that day forward, my view of Grace altered. She wasn't distant, awkward, or strange. I saw her more fully, not as stepmother, not as my father's widow, but as a woman lonely, mature, still ambitious, and as deserving of life's fullness as anyone. When she asked, "Would you like more orange juice?" I smiled. "Yes, Mom." I. For the first time, the word felt natural, unforced, a testament to a newfound mutual acceptance, devoid of prejudice or condition. Neither of us mentioned the incident. No need for words, no need for confrontation. We chose to let it lie, not because it lacked importance, but because some things, shrouded in silence, command greater respect. I began to rethink the concept of boundaries. Not all boundaries require words, and not everything that transcends societal expectations is inherently wrong. Some feelings become dangerous only when we attempt to define them. Left undisturbed, like a subterranean stream, silence allows them to endure. That night I wrote in my diary sometimes, what shames me most isn't the actions of others, but the way I believed they had no right to those actions. The following day, I suggested to Grace, let's go somewhere, maybe the beach. A change of scenery. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but her gaze was softer than usual. You mean, get away? I smiled. No need for labels, no need for explanations. Let's just go. Some moments require no words, no arguments, no validation. They simply unfold, quietly. But afterward, things were irrevocably changed. After that evening of accidental intrusion and unexpected discovery, I didn't question, she didn't explain. No apology, no judgmental stare, only the thick, heavy silence permeating every movement, a silent acknowledgement of our shared knowledge. We had glimpsed a side of each other never before revealed. The next morning, in the kitchen, Grace prepared tea as usual. She placed the cup on the table, her demeanor unburdened. No evasive glances, no hesitation. Yet I sensed a shift, a subtle alteration in the air. We ate breakfast in silence, not an uncomfortable silence, but a fragile silence, a walk on eggshells. To speak might shatter everything. Grace didn't inquire about my presence in her room the night before. I offered no explanation. We accepted the moment without naming it, without dissecting it. That afternoon, while washing the car, Grace emerged with a glass of iced water. She handed it to me, then simply said, "It's getting warm." I nodded. Yes, rain in a few days probably. We stood side by side, silent. Simple words, yet in her posture, I felt a silent acknowledgement. I know you saw, but I also know you don't judge. That evening, as I prepared to close my door, I heard footsteps. Grace paused in the hallway, a moment of hesitation, then continued on her way. The soft click of her heels on the wooden floor, a quiet affirmation. We're still here, still under the same roof. For the following week, the sensitive subject remained untouched, but the tension had eased. Chores continued, grocery schedules were shared, reminders about the downstairs plumbing were exchanged. I noticed Grace's clothing choices had shifted subtly, not flamboyant, but with a hint of renewed self-expression. One day, she wore a familiar scent of perfume my father had given her. I didn't ask, but understood. She was reclaiming herself, a woman with her own life, a world not confined to the role of stepmother. One evening, while folding laundry, I dropped a towel. Grace bent to retrieve it, our hands brushing. Neither of us recoiled. No surprise, no words, just a shared moment of eye contact. Then she said, "Thank you for not asking." I replied, "Because I didn't think you needed to answer." The moment was fleeting, yet profoundly significant. We had traversed a turbulent sea, yet preserved our mutual respect. The next day, a note on the table: freshly brewed ginger tea, if you need it. I folded the note, tucking it into my pocket. What? Not because I craved tea, but because I needed the quiet affirmation of her care. And I responded by silently repairing my father's old photo frame, replacing the cracked glass. I didn't rehang it, but placed it in a drawer, alongside a handwritten letter Grace had penned to my father years ago. I knew she would see it, and I wanted her to know I don't forget, but I don't imprison you there either. We hadn't solved anything, but by not speaking, by not retreating, we chose mutual forgiveness in silence. Not because we were blameless, but because we both understood sometimes, to preserve something precious, we don't need to explain. We just don't tear it apart. Grace returned, a little more cautious, but not withdrawn. I stopped avoiding her gaze. We found a new normal, where silence wasn't a barrier, but a gentle bridge. The sea breeze held a unique fragrance, unlike any land-based wind. It carried the scent of salt, the rhythm of the waves, and something elusive, something akin to nature's forgiveness. We arrived at the beach late one afternoon. Grace's luggage was minimal, simple clothes, a book, sunscreen, and worn flip-flops. The cottage was modest, situated near the ocean, quiet and unassuming. We spoke little as we unpacked, yet we both knew this trip was more than a simple change of pace. That evening, we dined on the wooden porch, yellow lights strung overhead. The waves lapped gently beneath our feet. Afterward, Grace retrieved a thin blanket and beckoned me to the sand. The moon rose, casting a silvery glow on the white-capped waves. The cool sand embraced our bare feet. We sat at a comfortable distance, not too near, not too far. Grace spoke softly. "It's been a long time since I heard the ocean at night." I asked, "When was the last time?" She paused. The last time I was here with your father, she said, the wind ruffling her hair. I clasped my hands, my gaze fixed on the horizon. I knew I had to speak, not to liberate her, but to empower her to live. I drew a deep breath. Mom, I said softly, you don't have to remain in this role forever. Grace turned, her eyes unwavering. I continued, I'm a grown man. I can take care of myself. You don't need to exist solely for my stability. I don't want you to sacrifice any more for me. The wind intensified, a corner of the blanket momentarily lifting before settling back onto the sand. Grace's eyes were bright, not tear-filled, but unusually luminous. What are you talking about, Ryan? My voice was firm. I want you to live your life, Mom. You're still beautiful. You're still healthy. You deserve a partner, someone to love, someone to share your life with, if you choose. Grace turned away, silent, save for the steady rhythm of the waves each one a long, slow sigh of the ocean. I didn't press, didn't push. After a while, she sighed softly. There is a part of me that died with your father. A part I thought would never come back to life. I nodded slowly. I understand. But the rest is still alive, she continued, and I don't need anyone's permission to live. We sat in silence, a comfortable silence, neither feeling compelled to leave. The wind grew colder. Grace drew the blanket around her shoulders. If I really start over, she asked, would you be angry? I smiled faintly. I would be proud. Because I know how difficult it is to dare to live again after loss. Grace gazed at the sea, saying nothing more, yet I felt her hand move closer to mine. We didn't need a hug, didn't need dramatic displays of emotion. Just an unspoken agreement from tomorrow, a new beginning, without stepping over the ghost of the past or denying old feelings. That night, before bed, Grace opened my door, leaving it ajar as always, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." "You've always been real," I replied. "I'm just old enough to see it now." The trip lasted 3 days. There was no dramatic climax, no explosive revelation. The trip ended after 3 days of gentle sunshine, moonlit nights, luminous and high, and a few quiet conversations. Nothing remarkable. It didn't need to be. Just a silent pause for two souls, scratched raw, finding their breath again. Returning, our small house, home for so many seasons, remained unchanged. The porch still creaked, a scent of aged wood and wind whispering through the west window persisted. But we weren't the same. No one said it, but in every gesture, every measured step, Grace and I knew. Our time together had reached its quiet, beautiful limit. I no longer descended the stairs each morning, as if intrinsically part of this place. My movements were slower, my observations sharper within me. Something had bloomed, not sadness, but readiness. One morning, while mending the kitchen cabinet doors, a familiar chore, Grace stood behind me, a cup of tea in her hand. "Thinking about going back to school?" she asked softly. I paused, turned, nodded. "Thinking about a course this fall," I replied. She didn't press, only smiled a smile that said, "I understand, and I support you." We didn't discuss moving out. No papers were signed. No suitcase lay abandoned in the middle of the room. Yet, subtly, we began to withdraw. I wasn't home for dinner every night, sometimes lingering at the coffee shop, other times walking further than usual. Grace no longer tossed my laundry in with hers. She folded my clothes separately, placing them neatly by my door. No note, just the silent, considered act. Folding shirts one evening, I realized Grace hadn't called me your father's son in a long time. Now I was simply Ryan, a young man who'd been hurt, who'd leaned on her, and who was now finding his own way. One afternoon, Grace placed an envelope on the kitchen table. "Some money your father left," she explained. "I don't need it. I thought you should have it." I picked it up, silent. No refusal, no thanks, just a long look and a knowing. She'd chosen to relinquish the role of provider, offering freedom unburdened. That night, I packed a few personal belongings, essentials only: a book, laptop, journal, some clothes, a small framed photo of the three of us: Dad, Grace, and me. I didn't announce my departure. Grace didn't ask, "When are you leaving?" We let it unfold as if silently agreed upon. Before dawn the next morning I left the house. No slamming door, no tears, just a small note beside the still warm teapot. "Thank you, Mom, for not keeping me, and for teaching me how to hold on to myself." 3 days later, Grace called a repairman for the porch. A week after that, lavender appeared along the fence. A month later, a package arrived: my favorite scarf, freshly laundered and folded, a pressed, dried petal nestled within the newspaper wrapping. No letter. Neither of us had broken up, but a chapter had closed, a closure strangely pure. That silent farewell wasn't an ending, but a beginning: Grace's resurrection, stepping out from the role of caretaker to live for herself; mine, a son emerging from the safe zone of grief, learning self-reliance. We no longer shared a roof, yet in a way, we remained connected through our quiet maturation. 3 years passed swiftly, sometimes seeming a dream. I'd graduated, lived in a town 5 hours away, secured a steady job, built a few connections, and occasionally felt a vague nostalgia. One June morning, as the wind carried the scent of new sunshine, a simple text from my old neighbor arrived. Grace still tended the lavender, but now had help watering each afternoon. I didn't ask questions, I simply made an appointment, and the next morning I was on the road. The route to the old house was familiar, winding, lined with oak trees, the rustling of cicadas in the wind. I stopped at the gate. The house looked much the same, but something was instantly apparent: it was alive, no longer a place of endurance. Before I could ring the bell, the gate swung open. Grace emerged. Her hair was shorter, her clothes neat, simple, yet somehow brighter. Her eyes met mine as if no time had passed, no overwhelming emotion, no tears, just a smile. "Ryan," she greeted me, "I came to see Mom. Would you like some tea?" We sat on the porch, as we'd done 100 times before. Chamomile tea, a thin lemon slice, 2 old china cups. Grace shared small stories: a newly planted rose bush, a stray cat, a book club meeting. I spoke little, simply listened, seeing that she was truly living, not merely existing. After a while I asked, "Are you okay?" She glanced toward the yard where a man bent to water the lavender. "Yeah," she replied. "I'm fine. I'm living the life I want." Heh. I didn't inquire about him, there was no need. I saw him turn, offer Grace a brief smile, then a nod in my direction. I nodded back. No introductions, no explanations, yet everything was clear. A part of me choked up, not from sadness, but joy. This was what I'd hoped for 3 years ago on that beach, and it was happening without drama, without fuss. Grace looked at me, her voice soft. "You were right, Ryan. I don't have to live the rest of my life in silence." I clasped my teacup, smiling. "I know you can." We needed no further words, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had been said. We'd needed each other to survive, then quietly released each other to live. Now, we could meet again without pain, guilt, or confusion. That afternoon, I visited the back garden. The lavender Grace had planted now carpeted the small path. Butterflies fluttered, bees hummed, the air was thick with sunshine. I stood still, breathed deeply, and for the first time in years, my father's presence no longer haunted the house. Not because I'd forgotten him, but because I'd accepted that life isn't about remaining in memory, but moving forward with gratitude. Leaving, there was no lengthy goodbye. Grace walked me to the gate. I held her hand a moment, then let go. "You'll always have a place here," she said, "but I know you have your own path." I nodded. "Me too." The car pulled away, the afternoon light reflecting an image, a woman by a wooden gate, waving gently, a man tending flowers, a house, finally coming alive. Life isn't a straight line, it curves, turns, sometimes seems lost, then silently guides us back to where we need to be. 3 years ago, in a small suburban American house, two people survived loss. Unrelated by blood, they'd stayed together after the person connecting them was gone. Grace, the stepmother, Ryan, a young man beyond his teens. They lived as shadows, huddled against the sun. No one understood their interdependence, their reluctance to leave. Gossip swirled, rumors flew like wind through the fence. Yet, in that house, they silently shared breakfast, tended the garden, and endured a void no one else could fill. Then, unexpectedly, a small moment revealed unseen aspects of each other. And instead of blame or flight, they chose silence and respect. The subsequent journey wasn't escape, but a sigh. We've held each other long enough. Now let's let go. No goodbyes, no painful scenes, just one person packing, one folding a towel, both releasing the bond. Grace lived authentically. She became a woman again, not a stepmother, not a past wife. Ryan left not from weariness, but from sufficiency. From Grace, he received not just shelter, but a profound lesson: how to love without binding, how to let go without abandoning. 3 years later, their reunion needed few words. A look sufficed. A new life bloomed behind the wooden gate. Flowers were watered, people loved, and the past preserved as maturity, not an unhealed wound. Life doesn't end when people separate. Roles simply shift from clinging to observing, from staying to blessing. Sometimes, knowing when to step away is the most sacred act of preservation. This is not a love story, nor a tragedy, but a transition from loss to rebirth, dependence to independence, role to self. Ryan once needed Grace's support. He helped her remember she could live a meaningful life, not just exist for the past. We don't always choose our companions after loss, but we choose how we live. Sometimes, a long look, a timely request, unbroken silence, these offer rebirth without sacrifice. The deepest love isn't possession, but knowing when to leave. You don't need to stay to be family, you simply help someone reclaim their lost self. In a world of relational boundaries and prejudice, Grace and Ryan's story reminds us that silent understanding heals, and timely release is a blessing. Remember, rebirth can begin at any age. Allow yourself to live as yourself. Thank you for listening. The story isn't loud, not climactic, but it shows that every life deserves a gentle ending. The rain fell softly, mirroring the quiet ache in my heart. Grace's departure hadn't been a storm, but a gentle fading of light, a slow exhale. I'd learned, watching her, that love isn't a cage, but a tender hand guiding someone back to themselves. Ryan, always thoughtful, understood this too. His quiet contemplation held a depth, a knowing that transcended words. Had shown me the beauty of letting go, of witnessing another's growth, even at a time when life feels worn and familiar. It's a lesson I carry now, a quiet strength, born from a parting as soft as falling rain. Letting go doesn't mean losing, it means freeing. The truest love allows growth, even when it means saying goodbye. It's in those quiet departures that we find the deepest meaning.